My name is Peter Larkum, and this is Mentality Meets. So we had Mental Health Awareness Week last week, and now we are carrying on. So this morning I have fellow mental health first aid instructor, Melissa Gale. Just before lockdown, I was invited to Melissa's show. And the amazing thing is that it's kind of gone full circle. So she interviewed me about mentality and why I was pushing that as a product. And so today we're going to be meeting with her and talking with her about all things mental health, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is Mentality Meets. So, welcome if you are new to Mentality Meets. We're just going to chat for the next half hour, but we are going to be chatting about all things mental health, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So what I need you to do is be very aware of what's going on inside of you, because if this conversation begins to kind of kick some stuff up and you need some help and support, please let us know. At the bottom of your screen, you have a chat bar. And what you can do is you can send a direct message to me if you are struggling. Otherwise, don't forget, we have the Samaritans on 116123. There's also a text service called Shout, where you can text Shout to 85258. And also on Mentality Meets, we're talking about the Hub of Hope, which is www.hubofhope.co.uk. And what I love about the Hub of Hope is that you can put your postcode in and it will show you all the mental health provision in your local area. Now, this is important because if you are supporting someone on the other side of the country, you can put their postcode in and find all the mental health support in their local area. Well, welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So, Melissa.
Hello.
On these times together, I just asked people to give a little bit of an introduction about who they are, the journey that they have been on in their life, and what has brought you to the place where you are today in what you do and why you do it. So let's kind of ping you and hear what you got to say.
Okay, ping me. Well, life has been quite a long one, so that would take a very, very long time to cover, but I'll just give a snapshot. So my background has been within sort of the commercial sector in business. But some years ago, I trained as a counsellor back in 2008, actually. I've always been drawn to understanding, helping and supporting people, and through a personal journey as well myself. That's the reason why I was drawn to that. And in recent years as well, I've trained as a youth mental health first aider. So I go into schools and deliver the mental health first aid course. And I'm very involved with a local charity that provides free counselling support to people of all ages, but they have a particular focus as well within the school, within the local area as well. And I suppose the reason for coming and joining you today was really to talk about a couple of key things around the word empathy and being non-judgmental as well.
Because those are easy topics to be kind of diving into, aren't they? Because I find that empathy is certainly one of those words that everyone goes, ooh. And then when you begin to unpack what empathy really is, it's quite a tough subject to actually kind of dig into and understand. So, dictionary definition, everybody. What is empathy? Don't Google it. That's cheating. But as far as you're aware, what is empathy? Now, Chandy, don't use your kind of degree head, which I know that you did last time when we did this. So, interesting response. Empathy equals opposite to Dominic Cummings. So let's go for it. What is empathy? Let's kind of throw that out. And Melissa, while people are kind of putting that out, can you give us just a little bit of your kind of headspace around this as a phrase and why it's so important?
For me, empathy is really key in understanding someone's unique experience. So whether, I know that obviously Mentality Meets is a focus on mental health, and you and I both know, Peter, that we talk about in our training as well that mental health is very much tied into our physical health and vice versa. And when we experience difficulties and perhaps a diagnosis as well, that is very much, broadly speaking, understood, but it is an individual experience for each and every person. And it's that's the key thing here for me, is is that through learning and understanding, we gain better insight into difficulties and illness as well, but that we need to be mindful that everyone experiences it in their own unique way.
Yeah, okay. I mean, because so over the weekend I've been doing gardening, okay, and on Friday's chat, I think it was right at the end of last week, we were like, what we're going to do for the bank holiday weekend, and basically kind of the idea was that we are going to drink, have barbecues, and burn. This was the weekend to burn, and sure enough, out in the garden, I managed to catch the sun a little bit. But that's not what I'm talking about, because while we were doing the gardening, chopping down a hedge, I also managed to chop through our internet cable. Not my finest moment, and panicked a little bit, thinking, I've got to get this done. But luckily, the man came round, fixed it all up. It's all good, don't worry. But what's the point of saying this? Because it meant that we didn't have our kind of recorded TV. You know, when you record TV, so you don't have to watch the adverts, which kind of meant that we had to watch the adverts. And the advert that kind of stuck out most for me was the Macmillan advert. And when people kind of hear that knowledge or information for the first time, and you've got all these people just collapsing, and then the people around them kind of running in to help prop them up. And I think imagery wise, for me, that context of empathy, of like, you know what, we don't know how you're experiencing this, but you know what, we are going to stand with you and hold you, and we can journey through this together. That for me kind of was just such a powerful imagery in the concept. So we've got empathy opposite to Dominic Cummings, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and the ability to understand others' feelings and their experiences in a sensitive way. And kind of, why is it so important? Why do we need to do this? Because we understand that it's a good word, and we understand that it's something that we should be doing, but why? Why is it such an integral part to the way we support people at this time?
Is that to me?
I'm not talking to anyone else. Go on. What have you got?
Well, can I just say that there's just a little quote that I'd like to read out, and this was stated by Carl Rogers, who is sort of a humanistic psychologist, founder of the person-centered approach. And just to read this: being empathic is seeing the world through the eyes of the other, not seeing your world reflected in their eyes. And that's I think really summarizes very well the fact that, as everyone has listed on the chat here, it is about really understanding, trying to understand as best as possible that person's individual circumstance. When we're being judgmental, it's obviously based very much on our own personal experience, our own interpretation, and our own understanding of a certain matter. And with difficulties and illness, we can change. There's always the opportunity, there's always the chance that we're managing a situation and we change, and we can recover, and we can move on from that as well. I was in my early years, in my 20s, I had ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, which is a very sort of misunderstood condition. And when I started to get onto the sort of road of recovery, and I moved away from my hometown, and I started sort of a fresh new life, I actually chose, rightly or wrongly, but I chose that I wasn't going to say to anybody that I'd had that previous history. And the reason being is because I always felt like I had to somehow justify and explain what that really was and how it had impacted on me, because it's so misunderstood. And I think there are many other sort of conditions that people have and experience that can be perceived as sort of acceptable, and others that are not so. And that's where judgment really needs to be put to one side, and empathy needs to come into place to, as I say, really understand a person's own experience and journey, and the fact that they can also recover from these things and move on, and that labeling that has been placed on them needs to be maybe put to one side, to enable them to grow and to enable them to develop like we all do. And we're not labelled by our illness, and we are not our illness. We are a person that are living with a condition, and that actual condition can stay with us and can be managed, or actually we can move on from it.
So is this where, in the context of mental health and people struggling with mental health illnesses, is this kind of where that cause and effect mindset comes in? Where it's like, oh, something must have happened and now you're experiencing mental health illnesses. And unless you can identify what that something is, we don't really believe that you're struggling with mental health illnesses. And it becomes a little bit of a, well, it's wrong. It's just wrong, because for a lot of people, there isn't this cause and effect. And life circumstances or just the fact that they are where they are, and it's so multifaceted that it becomes a very narrow perspective. And I suppose kind of what I'm hearing in the conversation that you're having about the ME is that unless you are able to justify why, people wouldn't really understand what you were going through or why you were experiencing it.
And I think for me personally, funnily enough, I mean, we've got this pandemic going on right now. I fell ill after a period of flu. So for me, it's, people may debate it, but for me, ME, chronic fatigue, was very much an organic illness. I'd had sort of probably a weakened immune system for a number of reasons beforehand, but I fell ill with flu and I did not recover. Now, the consequences later on, that had impacted on me. But I think the thing is with when we're looking at mental health as well, in the bigger picture of things that we're going through difficulties, or whether we've been diagnosed with something and why that comes about, sometimes, we may not have an answer for that, even ourselves. So how can we justify it to anybody else anyway? And that's why empathy really needs to come into place, because it's about understanding the person as they are at that moment in time and helping them in the best way possible. And that empathy should be carried down the track and into day-to-day life, week by week, that can change as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we've got this idea of empathy being the opposite of Dominic Cummings and putting ourselves in other people's shoes, and the ability to understand other people's feelings. And like you were saying, it's about seeing the world through somebody else's eyes, not the reflection of our own world in somebody else's eyes. And the ability to understand that everyone is different, and that you might not know what someone's going through, but you are there regardless and willing to learn and support the people around you without judging. So that kind of then brings us onto this kind of non-judgmental mindset. Because the thing is that what I'm finding, especially with this whole conversation around COVID and the situation that we're in, there are millions of perspectives. Everyone sees this thing differently. Everyone has their own level of caution or fear, if you like, around it. And other people are just completely blasé, couldn't give a, and life should be going on as usual. Now, it's very difficult when you have one perspective and somebody else has another perspective, and not being judgmental in that. If we wanted to, we could kind of throw politics into the mix, but let's not go there. Dave's already kind of raised that one. But it is that kind of processing of how am I allowed to have my opinion and my feeling about this, if it is contradictory to somebody else's, and yet they're able to shout and present their argument in a more formatted way than me. For me, I'm not an arguer. If you do kind of like has anyone come across the marriage tests or kind of personality tests? I can remember doing one with my wife when we first got married, and we found out that she was a rhino and I was a hedgehog. And these characteristics basically meant that she would thrash it out until she had got to the point. I, on the other hand, would curl up in a ball and stick my spikes out. And I'd find the areas of vulnerability and go, and kind of just point at those. And so in our ability to kind of have an argument, she would just, wah, and I would just, and kind of hide away from that. But I'd then become really gnarly and kind of quite horrid afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So arguing is not my forte. And so when I kind of try and have a conversation with someone to share my perspective and they have a louder, more aggressive style of communication, it becomes very difficult for me to kind of enter into that. And this for me is where that non-judgmental process comes in. I'm just having a slight giggle in the background because I've just read what Dave's put on the chat. So thanks, Dave. It's not a body shaming process; it's a characteristic process. And also, I am Mr. Tiggywinkle. Thanks very much. Just have that imagery in your head. What I should do next time is kind of go for the spiky hair and see if I can actually kind of turn into that character. My hair is definitely long enough. So sorry, Melissa, coming back to you. That non-judgmental mindset.
Yeah.
How do we allow other people to have their perspective and maintain our own?
Yeah.
And communicate it well without this judgmental, argumentative process going on? Any ideas?
I think we can only but take accountability ourselves for our own actions and the way that we interact with others. And I think in view of what you've just said there are two sort of key words that really stand out, and that is being respectful and also reflective as well. So it's being, and I suppose a third word into it is sort of awareness. So, you know, it's understanding that and we all have judgments, you know, it's easy to say, oh, don't be non-judgmental. We all have judgments, but it's understanding where that's coming from and what's that's about, and perhaps just sort of parking that to one side when you're actually sort of engaging with somebody and understanding what's going on for them. You may not agree. This is not about agreeing. It's about understanding what is going on for them and appreciating them and being respectful for them in their circumstance, whilst holding your own stuff. You know, and when we go through that process, we can then look at it and maybe try and understand their situation a bit better. And that's where I was coming from earlier as well, about that sort of education and open-mindedness, because we all come from a place of our own experiences. So it's respect and reflective that I think is the key thing, that we can have our own judgments, whether we stand strongly by them or not, but it's being understanding of somebody else's and respectful of that as well. We don't have to agree with it.
Okay, so I think that's the important part, isn't it? Is that we can disagree.
Yeah.
But we can disagree in a respectful way.
Yeah.
And by doing that, it then allows other people to have their view and for us to have ours. Now, the other side of it, though, is what happens when what they are saying actually has an element of logical sense to it, but it is contradictory to kind of our viewpoint or our standpoint on it. And now the reason I say this is because what I'm beginning to notice in my own worldview around this COVID side of things. I mean, we've got the context of schools going back, and again, I don't know what your view is on it, but for me, I'm on the side of caution, because I can't see enough scientific evidence that protects me in this idea, in this context, and so it's then kind of realizing that even in that conversation, there is an element of fear and anxiety and worry and caution. And how do you begin to marry those two together, especially when you are already an anxious kind of person? You know? Because I don't see myself as an anxious person, but I do see myself as a cautious person. And I don't want to throw caution to the wind and just go, nah, well, let's just kind of... Because the potential knock-on effect is devastating, actually. When you begin to look at kind of the reality of this thing that has taken over the world, you know, and we just get very blasé about it and go, oh, well, you know what, let's kind of, I can't see it. But the thing is that that's a cautious side of it, and other people have different views. So how do we begin to enable a conversation where you can have different views? Okay, question out into the chat room. Okay, have you had a conversation about COVID-19 with a neighbor, a friend, a family member, where your perspectives are different? Okay, have you had a conversation with another person, basically, where your perspectives have been different? Let's still go for a yes/no answer, because I'm going to deepen it in a moment. But Melissa, have you kind of been in a situation where you, like you say, you had to kind of justify your opinion or your perspective, or have you just kind of simply been able to go, meh, okay, fine? What's been your situation on it?
It's been mixed. It's let's just go back, say, at the very sort of early stages of when we went into lockdown. Sadly, my dad died earlier on this year, and we literally just had his funeral before lockdown took place. But I was already cautious and concerned about how things were unfolding. And there was a family member, I respectfully put out sort of a message to everyone to say that we need to have distancing. And this was before lockdown sort of, as I said, started, but we still need to be really respectful of distancing and be very cautious, because we had a mixed group of individuals. And a response from a family member was that they sort of understood that, but they said that the funeral was, it's an emotional place, which it really, really is. And they naturally are a hugger. And that in itself, I was really frustrated and cross with that sort of, it seemed to me at the time, a flippant comment. And we had to have like an offside conversation about what was going on, because he was coming from one angle and I was definitely coming from a very strong perspective in being very careful. And sadly, of course, what we realized is that was very much a needed requirement, but there was a little bit of conflict there, and that was a hard one. So we were in disagreement, and it's not always easy.
Yes. So just on the chat, we've got yes, no, yes. So there's definitely kind of chats going on. And just a quick message from Dave saying, just so sorry to hear about your dad, which I also echo. And that kind of huge hugs going on, which is difficult in these kind of settings. The computer doesn't give a good hug, I've come to realise. But you're right. So the next question which I had is that if the answer has been yes, kind of, was there a resolution? Did you argue it out until they agreed with you, or you agreed with them? Or were you able to end the conversation still having two very different perspectives? In essence, was there a winner, or did both people win? Okay.
We came to an understanding, and he sort of reflected. And yeah, he was mindful of the situation more so. I think he was unfortunately, he was one of the ones that had that more flippant opinion in the early stages of it being more a general sort of flu. But actually the reality is, and I think it's probably a case for quite a few people, that the reality has sort of really suddenly, in those earlier stages in lockdown, reality kicked in of actually, we're dealing with something a bit bigger. So yeah, it all got smoothed out. And I think really now in the bigger picture of things again, and we were talking just before we sort of came on live with this, Peter, is the fact that the unfortunate circumstance that we are all in, however we deal with it, it is about taking care of ourselves in every way, shape or form. But also this pandemic has meant that it is all about others. It's all about looking out for others, because the way that the illness operates is so very questionable. So we all have to look out in caring for others, in making sure that we're keeping that distancing and so forth as best we can, because there will be those still, unfortunately, that will ignore the rules. going back to Mr. Cummings earlier on. So we can only do and play our part in it as best as we can do, and hope that the majority of people operate in that way.
Yeah. Oh, can you believe it's already kind of 27 minutes past? We have 3 minutes left on our conversation. So yeah, so just kind of the question out into the room. Did you have to fight it out to get a winner, or were you able to kind of both see each other's perspectives and kind of go with it? And the final question that I want to throw out there, just because this happened to me literally this morning, has anyone had the embarrassing sneeze or coughing fit while you've been out and about? Because I got out of the car at a local shop this morning, and you know when you kind of have the sun, just the brightness of the sun makes you sneeze. So I had that, but it wasn't just the one sneeze, it was 3 sneezes back to back. And then you kind of got all these people in the queue, and everyone kind of looking at me, and I'm kind of sneezing away in the car park, and nobody wanting to get anyone near me, and all kinds of stuff. So has anyone else had those embarrassing kind of coughing fits or sneezing fits when you've been out in public? And yeah, because that happened to me too. So Melissa, final thoughts. Any kind of rounding up statements or thoughts in the context of what we've been talking about around empathy and non-judgmental processes?
I think the key thing is yeah, just remember that we are all unique. We all have our own personal story, our personal journey, and also in remembering that when people are going through things or they're diagnosed, they are not that condition. They are a person who is living with that condition, and that condition may pass as well. So it's not a forevermore thing. You know, there are different circumstances for everybody. So being mindful of people's own unique experiences and situation, and to keep safe and well, everyone.
No, totally. Oh, thank you so much. I just had I was having a conversation with my wife yesterday about kind of us and the circumstances of having 3 small boys and trying to manage all that. And then we just kind of sat and thought, you know what, there is no part of life where this is an easy lockdown process. Kind of got small kids, it's tough. Teenage kids, tough. No kids, tough. Living in a whole family context, tough. Living on your own, tough. Older, kind of retired, it's tough. There is no one is finding it easy, I don't think. Yes, there may be easy days, but actually it's just not normal. And just that idea of kind of remember that every single one of us is different. Our experience of this process is different. We are allowed to have different views and different perspectives. And most importantly, we are allowed and need to be treating other people with respect, even when our worlds are different. And so just kind of finishing off, we both respect each other's opinions. Haven't had the coughing or sneezing fit, but observed someone else who has. It might have been me, Sarah. Chandy agreed to disagree, but it's all very awkward. But it does mean that people actually distance you from you, so always a positive. So actually, if you want people to stay away from you, have a sneezing fit or a coughing fit out in public. Dave Chorner says, all the time, I can't stop sneezing. Just rub my face on the nearest stranger to stop it, if it works for you. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what? We are at 11:30, so this is my opportunity to say thank you so much, Melissa. Now, in the context of my last sign out from Zoom, I said, and this is Melissa Gale, and it pointed to the wrong person. So I've got to try and figure out whether I meant to go, that's Melissa Gale. I've been Peter Larkum. You guys have been absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. Take care. God bless. And bye-bye now.
Thanks, Peter.
And there's our official ending. Whew. What a quick 30 minutes that was. That kind of disappeared in an instant, didn't it?
It did. It did. Was that all right?
Oh, it was brilliant. I think what I love about these kind of conversations is that every single one is different and a new perspective comes out all the time.
Yeah.
And I think kind of what has stood out for me in this session is just that idea of the fact that we are all different and experiencing it differently. And yet we are still able and should be constantly thinking about that respect side of things.
Yeah.
And being allowed to see things differently. And I really appreciate that. So thank you very much for bringing that to the table.
No,
so Have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you so
Yes,
much
and
for
you
being a
too.
guest on my show. It was lovely being a guest on yours.
Yeah. Ah.
So thank you so much. Right, for anyone else who is still on the chat, thank you so much for your time today. Take care.
Yeah.
God bless.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Bye bye
Peter.
now.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.